Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Joining us now from The Athletic, Mike Sando. I've been reading his work for a long, long time. There's so many lists that come out this time of year, and Mike has been doing this kind of work, surveilling the landscape of the NFL, talking to front office folks, talking to coaches, talking to players for years. And his are some of the lists that are actually worth reading. So, Mike, appreciate your time as you put out your annual quarterback list and get all the buzz from, I'm sure, a wide variety of opinions from all 30 NFL markets.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to 50 coaches and evaluators every year about anywhere between 30 and 35 veteran quarterbacks, however many there are that are kind of in the mix to start. This year we had 8 GMs, we had 10 head coaches, 15 coordinators, 10 other front office executives, and I think 3 or 4, 5, other types of coaches. So it's a good cross-section of what the league thinks of the players at that position, with a few caveats. I think certainly for someone like Sam Howell or Desmond Ridder, who've hardly played. I mean, they're just kind of, they're not going to really get a whole bunch of, high marks at this stage just because they haven't done anything. It doesn't mean people don't like them, but you sort of need to see more.
For sure. And the other thing I love about your rankings, obviously you wind up with a 1 through 30, whatever it is. This year, as you said, 35. But you try to tier them, which I also appreciate. I think that's always the best way to do it, to try to come across with a fair representation. I think it's no surprise here in D.C., just because of what you said, where there's so much more to see with Sam Howell, at least we're hoping there is, that he winds up towards the bottom in the tier system. But I think, Mike, what caught people's eye here were some of the quotes in your story about Sam Howell, and specifically about Ron Rivera taking on this year with Sam Howell. What was your kind of reaction as those quotes are being relayed to you about Howell and the Commanders' decision to move forward with him as their starter?
Yeah, just kind of, it's more on the situation than it reflects on Howell. I don't know that. Look, there's not a bunch of people who think Howell's going to be a superstar, but if there were, he would have been drafted a lot earlier, right? So I don't think there's a whole lot negative on him. Just the idea that the Commanders are going to go with him. Not everyone's buying in that that's necessarily the direction they're going to go ultimately, because they did give $8 million to Jacoby Brissett. And then, kind of Ron Rivera's handling of the quarterback position, just the whole context of that, and I think people sort of made fun of the idea after, I think he'd had one start and we got in the off season when Ron made drew the comparison to, hey, Brock Purdy type thing. And people in the, around the league were like, great, is that the best comp you can do? A guy who played, 5 or 6 games in the regular season and then, is on the injured list and really hasn't proven anything in the league. So Brock Purdy could go either way at this point. So, we'll see. I think if you go back to Carolina even, of course they had Cam Newton, but then, hey, Kyle Allen got hot. He was going to be the guy, right? That sort of thing. Oh, Carson Wentz, my decision. So there's a little bit of that context that probably opens up Rivera to some questioning when he is anointing a completely unproven player.
Right. And so that's the thing I think that struck me as interesting about it, Mike, as Mike Sando is our guest from The Athletic here on the Hoffman Show, is everyone always says the loveliest things about Ron Rivera and as a human being, and they compliment his character and all this admiration for a guy that's been in the league as a player and a coach for, at this point, 40 years. But these quotes seem to peel back a little bit of that. Like these are brutally honest in a way that you still don't be brutally honest with someone or about someone unless there maybe isn't quite as much respect as you put out publicly. So I just ask, what do people actually think of Rivera, the NFL head coach, at this point in his career?
I think people think he's, been a good coach in the NFL, but the handling of the quarterback and being more in charge of as he has been there, some of the personnel stuff probably isn't in his wheelhouse. So, I think the handling of the offense by a defensive coach brings its own issues in terms of how you want to play and how you want to evaluate and all of that. So, I think Ron Rivera is revered as a man, is respected as a man, and as a head coach. But the handling of the quarterback position isn't something where he has, just come away with straight A's, right? That's where he could easily be questioned.
The quotes that make the story, obviously questioning how you talk to so many people. You said you talked to 50. Was there anybody that's like, damn, I really wish that we would have drafted him? Like, they got a steal. I think this kid's going to be great.
No, but I wouldn't have asked all 50 of that exact question about every player in the poll, right? I mean,
Sure.
We go through the ballots, and then I'll ask some questions about certain guys, and usually we'll talk at least a little bit about each guy. But I think there were some people who liked him more than others coming out and think he can be a starting quarterback in the NFL. But I really didn't get the feeling of that there was a lot of upward mobility in their minds, that people, were saying, hey, he's going to really make a big move and be, in those top two tiers. I'd never heard anybody say that. So, we'll see. Guys have proven people wrong before, and a lot of that depends not only on what's they're made up of inside, but what is the situation? How's the offense run? The weapons, all of those types of things. And I think they have pretty good weapons in Washington, so he'll have a chance.
Yeah, I was at practice this morning. Can confirm Terry McLaurin, still very good at football. Mike Sando with us here on the Hoffman Show. As I said, you've been doing this type of ranking system and doing this exercise for a number of years now. Who are some of the players that in the past have been able to jump past expectations? And is there any kind of tie that binds them in terms of traits that you might look at as the type of, or the archetype, I guess, for a quarterback specifically who can overachieve based off what the league thought he could be?
So I can see several in here, and there are some common traits. So Josh Allen has been in this poll for 5 years, and he's improved every year. Probably started out in tier 4 or right around there, and has gone all the way up incrementally, getting better. Jalen Hurts went from, I think he was 30th overall to 20th to 6th. Russell Wilson came in and was a third round pick. What's Pete Carroll doing? And he climbed up. Of course, he's come back down, but he climbed up. Even a Geno Smith last year was last in the bowl and kind of came out of nowhere. I would put Smith in a little bit of a different category. And I think if you look at Josh Allen, if you look at Jalen Hurts, to some extent Russell Wilson, those guys did have some running ability that maybe helped them early on, gave them another dimension, while they sort of worked into refining themselves as passers. So that's where probably Justin Fields is right now. If Justin Fields wasn't a good runner, he might not even be starting at this point because his passing is so rough. But that ability to run buys him time, buys him a runway to prove he can develop in some of the other areas. Sam Howell's not going to have, he's not that type of athlete like those guys who's going to, rush for 50 yards or 60 yards each week until he gets going. He's going to have to throw it better from the beginning. Yeah,
that's interesting. How's the level of athlete that certainly you can call a zone read, and if he pulls it, you're not, defensive line can't just like slowly turn around and go chase him like they could Tom Brady at age 39, or maybe even Tom Brady at age 27. I think Tom got faster as his career went. The bar was fairly low, but certainly not the 50 to 60 yards a game type of guy. For Brissett, he's not in the poll, if I'm remembering correctly. That, or I needed to scroll down farther. But
no, he's not in this one.
Yeah, I say he's I got to at least 28 because that's where Sam was. But for Brissett, like if you had put him on, and let's say he's the starter. I know this is a giant hypothetical here, but let's say Sam's not the starter and it's Brissett and he's the one on the ballot. Where do you think he finishes in this poll?
Well, so he was in it going into the 2018 season, and he was, his average would be very, very close to what Sam Howell's is. He had 9 votes in Tier 3, 34 in Tier 4, 7 in Tier 5, meaning they didn't even think he was a starter. So I think he would do a little bit better than that now. I think he actually had a pretty good year with Cleveland. That offense was rolling along pretty well with him starting. He has limitations. Probably is best suited as a backup who doesn't play the whole season. He's probably a classic Tier 4, but I think he probably played like a Tier 3 quarterback last year. You'd probably slot him in somewhere around the bottom of Tier 3 after last year. And I think that's what will be interesting to me with a defensive coach like Ron Rivera, who is pretty deep into his tenure and probably wants to win the games a certain way, more on defense, and probably really wants to avoid mistakes and turnovers. That's just the DNA of most defensive coaches. So how alluring will what Jacoby Brissett brings as a, though limited, predictable, probably stable veteran, low ceiling, pretty high floor, knows more of the game, has a better feel for it, right, and can just operate the offense. You're not learning anything. You're not going to go anywhere long term, but you might be able to squeeze out some more victories in the short term. I think that would be the interesting consideration if Howell were to struggle through the preseason or, the first month of the season just goes poorly. Is Ron Rivera in a long-term mode right now?
Right. Yeah. A question we won't know. And of course, new ownership might have something to say about that one way or another as well. Last question for Mike Sando here from The Athletic, their NFL writer. His quarterback tier's out now on The Athletic. Eric Bieniemy is kind of the guy that gives us, he is the guy that gives a lot of us in DC hope. I'm someone who believes scheme can elevate quarterback play tremendously, can elevate offensive line play calling and play call sequencing, can elevate all of this stuff. How much do you think Bieniemy is capable of working with a young but talented guy like Howell and elevating him to, a high tier 3, low tier 2 type of performance level, even as soon as this season?
So I'm going to say what I would say about anyone who's been under somebody like Andy Reid. I just don't know. I mean, how could we evaluate him separate from Andy Reid? Years ago when I first started covering the NFL, Mike Holmgren was the coach. He was in charge of all of that stuff, the play calling and quarterback development. Yeah, he had quarterback coaches, and in fact, one of them was Jim Zorn. And then Jim Zorn got a head coaching job, right? So Eric Bieniemy could be Jim Zorn or he could be Andy Reid. We really can't evaluate him fairly when you're under such an elite, dynamic offensive coach who gets the best out of Alex Smith, gets the best out of Ron Rivera, gets the best out of Patrick Mahomes. Everything goes well. But when those guys underneath him go out and strike out, they're sort of like everybody else. They may or may not make it, but we don't really know. So how could we know what even Bieniemy did in Kansas City? What was he responsible for? Patrick Mahomes, I'm assuming, is going to look pretty good this year.
Sure.
No matter what, right? So, I wish I could say for sure he's going to come in there and it's going to be amazing, but I think that's hard to say when you're evaluating somebody coming in and they haven't had it all on their plate. The other context of this is, like I said, defensive head coach. It's not Bieniemy coming in as the head coach and getting to install it exactly in his vision and play how he wants to play. Now, maybe it overlaps, but the defensive head coach is going to pull in the reins sometimes, guaranteed. That's just what they do.
Yeah, that's interesting because almost infamously at this point, Ron is giving Bieniemy a ton of control and power over even how practice is structured and everything, but we'll see once the live bullets start firing if that changes. I do confidently, I feel like I can confidently say, Mike, EB will be better than Jim Zorn, especially in Washington, because it is literally impossible to be worse.
Well, but Jim Zorn was the head coach too, so that's
sure.
A different thing. Like if Jim Zorn had come in as the coordinator under a defensive coach, maybe he could be evaluated. Maybe he would have done a better job. I'm sure he would have. So Bieniemy doesn't have to be the head coach. He just has to run the offense, and he should be, he should be good, but I don't know how you could prove that he's good or bad. He could be amazing or terrible, and I don't think we would know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think that, like, getting to watch him coach in practice, seeing the attention to detail, and especially comparing it to previous coaches that, I mean, I used to be a beat reporter, like, comparing it to that kind of stuff, you go like, wow, this guy's on top of the type of things that helped this team or teams that I've covered be successful in the past. And that's all you can hope for this time. But there is a great point to, because I think there is a runaway freight train of excitement for what EB brings, that when you get into the games, sometimes the play calling and the sequencing and all the things that you just anticipate are going to be taken care of can go sideways. And how does he handle that? Can he make the adjustments? And ultimately, can he do it when there's not hey, Andy, I don't have something. What do you got for me here? Or you just have to, call a play every once in a while because Andy's looking for one.
Also, they're going to be totally limited or expanded by what the quarterback can do and what they think he can do and when. So, of course, everybody would like to dial up the Chiefs' offense, but you can't run that with every quarterback. And so we have a brand new quarterback who probably limits more than he expands what Eric Bieniemy wants to do, right? Eric Bieniemy probably has a huge menu, a big call sheet. He would love to go to all of it. But there's just no way you can expect a brand new quarterback who's hardly played in the NFL to be able to handle all of that. So there could be, hey, let's run the ball here. And that's certainly where, that's certainly what Rivera is going to want to do if they have doubt over the quarterback's ability to handle a more complex play or a drop back pass, all those things that put more pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, we shall see. That is the fun of this time of year. It's a whole bunch of we shall see. If you would like to see Mike Sando's quarterback tiers, you can read them in The Athletic. Mike, always great. Very much appreciate the work that you put into this. Always a great read, and thanks for coming on the show and talking about it.
Thank you.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.